And what I'm even finding even more, it's not the change who I am, it's becoming more myself. Because oftentimes now when I'm asking, when they define what it is they want instead of what's happening, and I say, who are you in that picture? How are you showing up? They think and they say, I'm just me. So it's not this really confident, inspirational person. That may be. But more and more, it's just, wow, I'm just really coming back to that, all that I can be, that I'm just being more of me in that moment, that I'm allowing myself to be that. And I find that this fascinating, this shift to that. And that's so powerful for them to even realize I don't have to become, I just have to be me. All of me is really okay.
Hey there, Lyssa deHart here, and welcome to the Coaching Studio, the podcast that dives deep with the brightest minds in coaching, psychology, organizational leadership, and the art of working with people. You'll hear intimate, thought-provoking conversations alongside rising and established voices shaping the future of human development. Expect real stories, bold ideas, and practical insights you can use to expand your coaching and leadership impact. Whether you're a coach, therapist, leader, or lifelong learner, you'll leave each episode with new insights and renewed inspiration. Let's go. Hello and welcome to the Coaching Studio. I'm Lyssa deHart, and today's guest is someone whose work has shaped the way coaches think, learn, and connect for nearly 4 decades. Dr. Marcia Reynolds, MCC. Marcia spent that time exploring a deceptively simple question: what actually changes the human mind? Her research into reflective inquiry, embodiment, and client-centered practice has influenced coaches, leaders, and organizations in over 47 countries, and her books have become the staples on coaching shelves around the world. Marcia has spent years studying the kind of conversations that actually change people. Many listeners already know her from Coach the Person, Not the Problem, and Breakthrough Coaching. Side note, she's re-releasing a second edition of Coach the Person, Not the Problem coming soon, with fresh insights on identity, learning, and what human coaching can do that AI cannot. What I appreciate most about Marcia is that she brings both wisdom and wild-hearted curiosity to her work. She just celebrated turning 70 by going skydiving, and she approaches transformation with that same sense of aliveness and courage. Today also feels a bit like a coming full circle moment for me, as Marcia was my very first guest on this podcast. She helped set the tone for these interviews, and I am thrilled to welcome her back into the studio. Marcia, welcome to the studio again.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be with you always.
Oh, well, I feel honored that this is where we are right now, and I am super excited to have this conversation with you today. You have a lot of very interesting things going on in your world, and I know we covered a little bit about your background, like what led you into this space of coaching on our first interview, and I'll leave a link below. But I'm wondering, because it's been a few years since you and I talked on the show, and you have spent a large part of your life looking at reflective inquiry, not problem solving, and really looking at what transforms people. And before we get into your thoughts on that, what do you think? Like, was there some pivotal moment that really led you to this place of curiosity and wonder that you find yourself?
I think even just the first time I saw a coaching demo, that triggered like, okay, something's different here. And I really am a research nerd. I like to figure it all out, and look at, and it was such a perfect time for me because the whole neuroscience was really just blooming. They weren't able to even scan the brain to see how we process information until 1995. when I found coaching. So it was kind of like this intersection, and so it was really about uh, how do learning. I see coaching as a learning technology. How do we really learn and grow? And so finding all the stuff on the brain and then linking that to coaching, and how does coaching really make that happen? It's just, to me, is fascinating. And so I'm always looking at trying to find, what else is new, what's being discovered, how we apply that to our coaching. And so I think every time I find something, a new book that gives me some insights on what we're doing, I just get very excited about it. I'm looking over here because I'm looking at the stacks of books that I'm reading even right now. So yeah, it's just a fascinating. And like, I love doing coaching demos because uh, I love that moment where I'm really doing the pure coaching, and there's that moment of insight in the person, and then I have all these people that can observe it just like I did when I observed my first coaching demo. That they get to see that there's so much power in what we do, that having that faith in the coaching process, that it can create this magical moment for the people that we're with, because of what they now see of not just the world, but who they are and who they can become. It's just such a powerful uh, profession that we're so lucky to have found.
Well, I 100% agree with you. And it really it makes me wonder, because it's sort of funny. In graduate school, I definitely studied Rogerian theory and client centered, and I liked Carl Rogers' work. But you've really brought those ideas into coaching, as you've been developing your own ideas and research around coaching. What is it, do you think, about this trust in the thinker client, and the invitation to that insight that
Mm-hmm.
you've discovered? Like, why is that so important, do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think that as we all got into coaching, and even the early years of defining coaching, and the coaching competencies, it was really kind of skill based. What do we do differently? And even when you go back and you look at the early thinkers, not just Rogers but Adler, and it even though it was founded on the belief that people aren't broken, they don't need to be fixed, and that we can just do this thing, and ask the right questions, be with them with curiosity, help them to recognize their potential, that was powerful. But it was still very skill based, and very much into what it is I say in that moment. And and the more that I got into this, and especially not just with AI, but even prior to that, with the pandemic, of really recognizing that it's uh, it's not just what we say, but the connection we make, and then really researching more about what is the magnetic energy of the human connection. And um, a good friend of mine just published a book called "Space is Not Empty," of looking at the field that
Yeah.
we create, that we are with the person, that it's we together. It's not just that I care about you and I'm curious, but that energy that I bring, that pulls us together within that space. How critical that is for coaching to work, for the words that we say to really make an impact on the person. So it's not just I can see um, it different now, just like, okay, so perspective shifts, but really having that, like, wow, my world just changed. That is so important. So even my research now of looking at um, the co-regulation of emotional energy, and what it is we need to bring with who we are in this moment, how we feel, and what we believe is so critical. And then coaching it and allows them um, that it opens their mind to be willing to even look at the deeper sense of not just what I see, but who I am. That really makes the difference to the person that we're with.
Excuse the interruption, Lyssa here. I would like to ask something from you. If you like this channel and you like the content that I'm offering, please do a simple, easy thing for me, which is subscribe to the channel. And on that note, let's get back to the show. You just shared something I think is really interesting as well as important. And that's this idea of co-regulation. I'm not sure everybody will be familiar with it. Could you explain that just a bit more, this
Sure.
idea of regulation and co-regulation?
Yeah, honestly, if you think about when you're with a group of people, it's always what we call the socially dominant person in the room. Hopefully, that's the leader. Sometimes it's somebody else, but whatever their emotional state is, then impacts everyone else. So if the leader's anxious, they're anxious. If the leader is like so excited, then they get excited. So what happens is, even if I am just your thinking partner, and I'm being equal with you, it still doesn't matter. Your brain still sees me as the socially dominant person, as the coach. So whatever it is I'm feeling is that you're going to then co-regulate to my emotional state. And my responsibility then is that I care. I'm here for you. I feel compassion and even courageous, that I'm giving you courage, and that you feel that. And what happens is, not only do you then feel like, oh, wow, she's okay to be with. And so there's a bonding, an oxytocin response, that occurs. And then and the neurotransmitters of dopamine and serotonin that says, okay, I'm willing to go on this journey with you. I'm open to it. Let's see what we can do. That we create that with our emotions, and that you then, what triggers in you neurochemically, is the states of safety and willingness to grow. And so we want to use our emotions from the moment we start, not halfway through. Once I get through with asking, so what do you want in our time together? Why is this important to you? What's your measure of success? Don't do that. Just be with them. Like, what's on your mind today? And be with them and really listen to the story. And I'm interested in you and how you see this. And what do you mean by that? And just let the conversation roll out, and then your curiosity of hearing what they're saying. And then you get to, so, okay, so I hear this challenge. What would it look like if you were to resolve this? Then you can get to, that agreement and those things that you're supposed to get and check off the list. But meet them,
Yeah.
like that. There's a field, I'll meet you there.
Yeah.
Do
Really.
that first. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's really, and I remember this from our first conversation where you said, just love them. One of your coach
Mhm.
educators had said, just love them. And what I'm really hearing here is, again, it's the being with the human
Mhm.
person, human being in front of you, and giving them that unfiltered, personal, positive regard, but also just
Mhm.
really being with them and where they are in that moment, not worrying about markers and check boxes, but really just being with them to find
Mhm.
what's coming up as important to them to
Yeah.
explore. And if I'm hearing you correctly, and I believe this firmly, so I may be biased. Here we go. But that sense of that presence that we bring into the conversation is so important to the safety that we create, so that people can
Mhm.
be creative and explore their
Mhm.
own ideas.
Yeah. Um, they will only go so deep, um, based on how they feel with you. And that's our brain is always looking for what could hurt me. So we have to let their brains know this is a good moment, this
Mhm.
is safe, and it's really good for you. And you can only do that with the emotional state, because that's what the brain is reading. They may hear you and respond to a question, but their brain is registering constantly, is this safe, is this good, and is it okay for me to be here in this moment and to go into this space with you. And anytime, so it's not just what you bring into the conversation, but that whole uh, the what is it now, the maintain emotional state. That I notice if they say something, then it kicks me off, for whatever reason. It doesn't matter, they could just hit my value system, or say something that was, whoa, that came out of left field, or maybe they resisted what you said. You have to catch in your body, because there will be a tightness somewhere when you have a reaction, and quickly release it and come back to that caring moment, like, okay, that was interesting. Let's take a look at that. So that we have that amazing capacity, that I can be here fully present with you, but also notice if all of a sudden I get this hit in my stomach. Is it intuition or is it my fear? And either way, to release it and then come back and being with you and share what I heard you say, and ask you about that.
Yeah, that ability to bring ourselves back, calibrate ourselves back to that place of where we can be present
Mhm.
again. Because you're right. I mean, people are going to say things that just kind of sometimes are like, like, what was that all about?
Yeah.
And how do we re-regulate ourselves? And and that calibration then happens if we stay regulated and calm, as a calm presence, they become regulated. It's kind of like the 5-year-olds, like as they're kind of playing with each other, they end up
Mhm.
mirroring each other to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you know, my first job was in a psychiatric hospital. And I remember that, and I had to learn how different things on how to teach, because I was my responsibility to create training programs. And the interesting thing is that when they had someone that may have had a psychotic break and was throwing things around or whatever, they didn't try to calm the person down like we see on TV and in the movies. What they, yeah, right, tie him down or something. They would go up to the person and they would say, "Would you like a cup of water?" Now they didn't give him a glass of water, and it was water, not coffee. But just the, oh, oh, then I'm coming to you very calm, and I just want to offer you a glass of water. Maybe that's what you'd like right now. That
Hmm.
sense, I'm just here for you. That it would instantly calm them down. It was like amazing to me to witness that. And so that no matter what, and my brain is also searching, is this safe, all the time as well. So that I might get triggered in the moment is a normal reaction. We can't bypass that. But just to notice it and go, well, that's interesting, and come back to be present. you know so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, being tied to a gurney probably is not relaxing or safe feeling. I love that. I much prefer the, would you like
A cup of water.
a cup of water? Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
You have talked about this space that is between us, and you've also talked about in some of your articles around the stories that live inside of us and that we live inside of as well. What 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 is it that you notice with people's narratives that you play with in the work that you do?
Mm. Well, I think that over the years I've gotten better at not really listening for the details of their story.
Mm-hmm.
So, they tell their story, and so, when we first learn to reflect back, we're just kind of parroting, pick a statement and offer it back. But then I'm listening for context. So let me really hear what's truly making it this challenge. What are they saying is important to them, their values that maybe are being compromised, that what is it that they're so irritated that they didn't get from the person, which is social needs, that's making this difficult for them, or they want to leave, or they don't want to see someone anymore. So I'm not just saying, okay, so what I hear is that you're not sure you want to talk to your boss anymore. Okay, that may be something that they said, but that your boss did this thing that is so huge to you, that it was so dismissive, that you just want to write him off. So listening more for those bigger things, not and yes, of course, the beliefs and assumptions, it's important to feed that back, but again, what is making this a dilemma for the person? um, that we hear that within the story. So I really have to listen into the story, so I really have to be, I'm not just present because I think it's a good thing for us to connect, but
Right.
for me to really hear those things. And so many times coaches ask me, how did you know to ask that? Well, it's like I didn't know cognitively, but it's like I felt the energy around that word, or what it was that was really, ugh, inciting their anger, their disappointment, their resignation. That's what hit me. And again, my nervous system, my gut, my heart, that because I work at being fully open, that it's like, that's what sounded important, let me offer it back. And you may hear something different, because again, I'm often asked, well, when they said that, why didn't you ask about that? And my answer is always, I didn't, but you could.
Right.
you know, because
Not
there's
one
so
right
much.
question.
Yeah, there's so much that they're offering, but oftentimes to be patient. They'll say something and you're like, okay, that sounds important, but they're still relating something about this. And oftentimes it comes at the very last sentence of their paragraph, that they'll say, yeah, but it's never going to work. Or I'm just so intimidated by these people, that it's like, okay, so tell me more about intimidation. Or really, are we really working on something that you think is there's no control, and that's never going to change? So you really have to listen through. Now I'm not saying listen to them for 15 minutes, because by then they've gone off into other directions, or way back into their history. So it's within the core story. And once they start to go beyond the core story, then to say, could we stop for a moment? I want to, like, share with you something that sounded important, to see what you have to say.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Well, and you said a couple things there that are, I think, really good points to emphasize. One is we're listening for context. We're not necessarily a specific thing, but that there's this context that words are being given to us, a story is being given to us, and a
Mhm,
context around it. And if we can be
mhm,
curious about what we're hearing, and
mhm,
to your point, you know, I would ask maybe a slightly different question. You would ask a slightly different question.
mhm.
Everybody listening to this podcast would ask their own variation of a different
Mhm,
question, but the difference might not be as big if what we're all doing is listening for context versus,
mhm,
I heard you want to have a list and you need, a checkbox on how to, I don't know, feel happier or whatever the checkbox is that you need, and getting really specific about that superficial thing. Whereas we're going to get to actions, but if
mhm.
we're really listening and really partnering, we're going to hear the greater, deeper context that's
Yeah,
emerging from that person. That's
yeah,
at least what I'm hearing as you talk about
yeah.
this.
There was an interesting, um, conversation this morning on the assessors platform, even about one of the MCC markers was saying it's most common to ask about the measure of success early on, and there's, the response was no. And to me, no, I can't ask for it till we clearly see what it is. you know
Yeah.
and I don't think they know. So a lot of my job of clarifying, what do you mean by that, and wow, what's making this important now? It's not just for me, it's for them, because they've been telling this story and it's been rolling around in their head for so long, they don't know what they're saying.
Right.
And so when we ask them, what do you mean by that, they're like, have to think about it. Oh, I don't know, what is it I mean by that? you know so even that, what do you mean by intimidating? Tell me more about what is intimidation to you in this situation, that it makes them think about their situation in a way they're not doing for themselves, mostly because we can't, to stop and really think through and analyze our own stories. Our brain stops us because that's not comfortable. I want to just rationalize my story. That's all I want to do. But you as an outsider start to ask me those questions, then I can't just fall into my rationalizations. I have to think it through. And that's
Mhm.
the gift that we provide. So providing that clarity, what do you mean? What's really going on here? What is it that you're holding on to that is making you still feel this way? That has to be identified first before we can even unwrap what is it they truly want that they don't have now.
Mhm.
And to me, that unwrapping and clarifying that picture of what they want and who are they in that picture is really their measure of success. So once they create that, that's what that would make them feel. And that would be the question: is that what would make you feel happy or content or fulfilled? Mhm.
There was some, this is really fascinating to me. There was some interesting research that came out in August around in executive coaching. Like pretty much all of executive coaching ends up getting into the human elements of, we get out of like leadership skills and into like, where am I struggling, and
Mhm.
why am I here, and how am I going to
Mhm.
show up? What do
Mhm.
you, based on what you're just
Mhm.
sharing about
Mhm.
what is needed for us to begin to explore, and for coaches to be curious, what is your experience in working with leaders and executives when it comes to applying these same ideas to those
Mhm.
conversations? Because oftentimes I get people saying, well, the executives I work with would never do this. But that hasn't been my experience. And so I'm really curious what your experience is.
Yeah. Um, well, first off, it is a little bit more, takes a couple sessions to move into that space, mostly because I don't care how well you identify what you do as a coach. They still see it as like, okay, so you're going to give me some tools to use or whatever. And part of that is, what I said about exploring, going deep into that. The higher up we go, the more we protect. And so they're still protecting. I'm the leader, and I'm here with you, the coach, to look at strategy and communications, and not necessarily how I'm showing up in this moment and what I'm deeply afraid of. So we still have to get through the protective mechanism a little bit and work through, their relationships, what's going on with, moments where they're not getting the engagement they want, um, working through that, and maybe not going as deep, but I find that once they have a session or two and they're totally comfortable with you, then you can go anywhere with them and challenge them. So like the time where the CEO of it was a tech company, and he came in. It was about, I think we were working a lot on his presence, and how do I get really present and not worry about things, and he wanted to apply it to his golf as well. you know Okay.
Where else in your life can this apply?
Yeah,
Golf.
yeah, yeah. He didn't mind talking about that. But one day he was just tearing everybody up. It's like, ugh, my assistant is so stupid and she makes these horrible mistakes and the employees don't care. I mean, it was like totally out of character. And I went, wow, it's like, boy, everything, everybody is awful. Is that what you're saying? And he was like, uh, well, maybe not awful. I said, but something. It's like, so just tell me, is there anything that's going well in your life? And he's like, no. And he, again, then he came to the realization he was beating everybody else up for his life after his divorce, which had come down to he was spending all his time at work, and because he didn't want to face his what came to the realization, his life without dancing,
Mm.
but I could not have gone there if I had not developed the trust with him to be able to challenge his, wah.
Yeah. Everything's horrible,
Yeah.
awful, terrible.
And yeah, is anything making you happy in your life? He wouldn't have answered, well, that's not what we're talking about, is my life. He wouldn't have gone there if I had not developed that trust. But I have found in every really difficult situation that it comes down to that. And once we have that trust, then we go there. Then we
Yeah.
go there. So to say that my clients would never go there, no, they're humans too. And usually, if they're struggling, they're smart people and they don't know what to do, or they're just repeating the same mistakes. There's something going on with them personally. So, but just it may take a little longer for one than the other. Um, but
Yeah.
we are coaching human beings.
Excuse the quick interruption, but I wanted to make sure that you knew that you were invited to my monthly coaches Q&A. It happens every third Monday of the month, and we talk about all things coaching. We talk about coaching demos, we talk about competencies, we talk about what to do with resistant clients, we talk about all sorts of things. Plus, we have an added networking event at the end of it. So you are invited to join this community. I would love to see you there. And on that note, let's get back to our regularly scheduled programming. Yeah. Yeah. And you have a new edition of Coach the Person, Not the Problem coming out soon. And I mean, you talk about some of them, like you're updating this and doing a second edition because of all the changes since you first published Coach the Person, Not the Problem.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the key things that you really have as as fundamental to this update on this
Yeah.
book?
Well, first I want to say that the reason I'm doing it is because it's ended up being one of my publisher's bestsellers. So, it's in 9 languages now. I'm just so amazed how it
It's
has just
amazing.
migrated around the world. And, so they asked me to do it and I said, oh, because I'm always going, I'm not going to write any more books. I'm done with writing books, but, and I said, okay, and it is time, because even breakthrough coaching, I brought in some new things, but with the whole really questioning and the fears around AI, and the two main things are about the human connection that cannot be replicated by something artificial, even if they think they could get close. Um, but even just what we're saying, that willingness to challenge, what I keep hearing is AI doesn't do that.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's been programmed not to. I think it's been programmed to be much more conciliatory or like,
Yeah,
oh,
right.
yes, Marcia, I've never heard it quite put that way.
Yeah,
You're brilliant.
exactly. Right. So there's that, but also um, uh, the identity based coaching, because I find that if we're really looking for sustainable change, behavioral change, that I must change who I think I am. And what I'm even finding even more, it's not the change who I am, it's becoming more myself. Because
Mm.
oftentimes now when I'm asking, when they define what it is they want instead of what's happening, and I say, who are you in that picture? How are you showing up? They think and they say, I'm just me. So it's not this, I'm this, really confident, inspirational person. That may be, but more and more it's just, wow, I'm just really coming back to that, all that I can be, that I'm just being more of me in that moment, that I'm allowing myself to be that. And I find that this fascinating, this shift to that even. So that, and that's so powerful, for them to even realize I don't have to become, I just have to be me. All of me is really okay. Yeah, I love that. So I am taking a deeper look. And even with that, I think since I submitted the manuscript, that I'm, as having these conversations, there's more and more coming out. So whatever then I share in promoting the book and blogs and whatever, I'll share more of that. So it'll be out in March 6th.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. And I mean, you started to talk about with the AI in the environment that we find ourselves now with it, and people's desire to really find their own sense of self and really become comfortable in who they are as
Mm-hmm.
themselves, me. What is it that coaches should know about, like, how to navigate this new world where every other day there's a new app for that, and AI for this, and
Mm-hmm.
all of what you, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to be quiet now, but like, what are you noticing? Like, what should they pay attention to?
Um, well, I think that, uh, what I've been presenting, a bulk of this year, and learning more and more, is truly about that human connection that will be difficult, if ever impossible, to replicate. um, that it's fine for problem solving, and I'm sure it can replicate, an entry level coach that's just focusing on problem solving. But even as an entry level coach, if I am creating a really safe space for you, and I reflect a little and ask you some questions, but allow you to really talk out loud and explore things, probably the only time in your day that you can do that, you're still offering a service that may or may not, be replicated. Because I'm not here, I, one of my Marcia isms, I'm not here to make you feel better. I'm here to help you see better. And
Yeah.
whatever that is in that moment that I'm capable of doing, with the energy that I bring, that I really care about you and I believe in you, that you can do this, and it may not be comfortable, because learning is often uncomfortable. That I'm not trying to make it comfortable for you. I'm just trying to help you to transform your thinking. That we have that it's not just about meeting the behavioral indicators of the competencies to be certified. It really is the energy we bring, and really understanding what that is. Mm.
There's something that you just said that sparked something for me, and that is around this idea of being with, and I'm thinking about like AI and how, and going back to the thing that you said about stories, we get so habitualized to our stories. And if you've ever been in a long relationship, which I imagine you have been, we can have arguments in our head where we play both parts, and we always win with our genius insights, and we come up with this like fabulous explanation for why we're right. And the other person in our mind is like, oh yes, Lyssa, I've never thought of it quite like that, that's brilliant. But in a way, that's kind of what AI is. It's sort of just a kind of a confirmation of
Mhm,
our own bias about our
mhm,
rightness or our
mhm,
specialness or whatever that is. And I think what I'm hearing is, in real relationship,
mhm,
we are have the opportunity to grow ourselves bigger
mhm,
than we see ourselves are anyway, right? Because we have another person who's sharing, in safety, but is sharing reflection and their own experience and their own perspectives back with us. And if, and it allows us to expand bigger than we were before, where I don't think with AI that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, in any conversation, whether it's coaching or an argument, yeah, that I have to come into it really, really genuinely curious about understanding your perspective, because otherwise it just, will clash. If I come in with the intention of changing your mind, or that you have to see it my way, that my intention is I fully want to understand how you see this, and I'm going to share some things back to make sure that I understand, and ask you maybe to clarify something so we both see the same thing, um, and with the intention and have the openness of that. I am so open that I'm willing that you will change my mind, and I think that's the most difficult thing. Yeah, that we go into this, and so I always say especially when I teach leaders, that there's three things we have to bring in. And number one is intention. What is my intention? Is my intention to change your mind? Well, then that's that energy that I'm putting out is I'm here to fix you, not that I want to be with you, that I'm here for you. So already our energy is combative. So is that intention is I really want to understand your point of view, and then maybe I have some things to share with you about mine. But again, with the willingness that as I listen to you, I might change, and openness to change. And so it's first intention, and then it's the constant regulation, maintenance of our emotions, because your emotion's going to impact them, not just your words. So if you're just waiting till they shut up to say something, it's different than I'm really interested. And then if there's a pause, and you've reflected back and you understand, to say, would you be willing for me to hear some of my perspective that may not match? There is going to be more of a willingness. And the third element, so you've got intention, emotional choice, and the third is respect. And I think I read a study once where that's the number one factor of making a conversation positive, even when we disagree, is that you still feel I respect you. I respect you as a human. I respect your experience. I respect how you see things, and we're just disagreeing right now. And that I say, even if you're disappointed with someone or angry, can you still respect the human in front of you who's doing the best they can with what they have? And I'll never forget, in my last job, I was working with a spiritual counselor because of the stress I was going through. And my boss, he was well known around the city as he was a horrible guy. He always had to, yeah. I knew nothing. He knew everything, and she said, he's doing the best he can with the amount of light that he has. It's just that his light's like this and yours is this. And I was like, oh yeah, that's it. And she goes, no, but you have the responsibility to model what big light looks like.
Ooh.
And I'm like, oh.
You have to do this stuff?
Yeah, so and my next conversation was my performance review, and I was sitting there going, big light, big light, big light, big light. And at the end, he went, wow, that was amazing. You didn't fight with me. It's like, he said, you've really grown. And I'm like, yeah, right. Big light, big light, big light. But you know what? It changed the relationship. He quit fighting with me and having to prove himself to me. I mean, it really softened it.
Yeah.
And so, it's that whole thing of, and I did respect the way he handled politics in the company. There was one thing I could respect him for. So the intention, the emotional energy, and respect, we have to go into every conversation with that. If we wanted to have a good outcome.
And I think 100%. And I think it's really interesting also because that idea of what is our intention for the outcome is so important.
Yeah.
And that I think back, like I taught anger management in the military for 7 years. And I would
Wow.
say that the number one thing that set people into anger management was feeling disrespected.
Yeah. And that's a social need. It's one of our greatest social
Mhm.
needs is that I work hard to be respected. Every high achiever isn't just doing it for their own benefit. They want to be acknowledged for what they do. They want to be respected. And if they're really a high achiever, they'll go somewhere else
Mhm.
without even telling you why. And that's why we lose the best people in companies. But that respect me as a human, it's so important. And when I teach women's leadership, of course it comes up, as one of the top social needs in a conversation. So we can't forget that. Even if I'm disappointed in you or angry with you, can I remember what it is that I believe in you, that you're capable of, that I can respect you for? We have to have that, or it will be, a compromise, which is a lose-lose situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I think that it's reminding me of some of the work around like autonomy,
Mhm.
you know, choice. Well, I guess that's autonomy, respect, and
Mhm.
purpose, and the things that we
Autonomy,
need.
mastery, and purpose.
Thank you. Those are the words I was looking for. I needed the assist. I should have just said
Yeah,
Marcia.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Daniel
it
Pink.
really.
Daniel Pink is his first name, Daniel?
I
Yeah.
think it is
Yeah.
Daniel Pink.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think that's just so. I mean, I think it's so
I want
true.
to do my best. Help me be my best. Coach me so I can do it on my own and make sure that I understand how significant I am to the outcome, which is my purpose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so important.
And
Mhm.
that visualization of who do I want to be in this situation? Because I've rarely had people who came to me who said, I want to be a total jerk. Yeah, like that's my goal. Like, I mean, I'm not going to say there's never been any of those
Yeah.
people, but I mean, it's a small group of people.
Mhm.
Most people really do want to show up with their best and
Mhm.
meet people and care about them. And when they realize, to talking about that energy, that the energy that
Mhm.
they're coming into is getting ready for a fight versus
Yeah.
wanting the best for the person they're about to talk to, that
Mhm.
changes the way they think about how they want to show up. Because if I'm showing up
Yeah.
because I want the best for you as
Because I
well,
want the
not just
best
for
for
me.
you. And yeah, maybe we can align what we both want, our goals. That's important for the intention, but I want to come back to that that whole idea of what you just said about, honestly, I'm not here to be a jerk. I'm really wanting to be my best. But even that is a great exploration. That so what is being your best? It's like when a leader comes to me and they're struggling with engagement, I don't ask them, what are you doing? I always say, define leadership to me. What do you think a leader's supposed to be doing? Because it's within that
Mhm.
the block is there. Their definition of being my best, is conflicting with what other people's definition of what they think a leader's best ought to be. That's the conversation, that identity of who I am at my best, even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wonder, and I mean, when you think back on your work, is it also that there's that kind of disconnect where I know what my best, like I know what I need to be doing, but oh my God, you mean I have to do it? Like I wonder if there's any of the, have you ever seen any of that in the conversations that
Well,
you're having also?
that's generally why they need a coach. Because I know that that's it, but I can't do it right now. They always, we are master rationalizers. Yes, I know I need to do that, but here's what's happening now, so it's not a good time. Or just, that risk is just too much. And so we're much comfortable staying in our comfort zone, even though it's not serving us anymore. I always say, the brain prefers self preservation to self actualization. Left to our own devices, we won't step out of that
Right.
comfort zone. Our brains won't let us. We think we are, but our brains won't let us. But if we have an external thought disruptor, someone outside of us to reflect what we're saying, to make us think about that, then ask the questions. Then it's like we bypass the protective brain, so we need someone outside of us to do that. And there's a lot of research that demonstrates that. I mean, even Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, it's like we don't stop and think. We need someone outside of us to do that with. That's why we need a coach to be able to do that, to get past those rationalizations we're so good at.
Yeah. And it really is that safe bubble that is developed between the energy of the two people, or however you're getting your coaching. Maybe it's the group of people, and that sense of, now I can be challenged. I'm safe enough to feel like
Yes.
the threat is low enough, and that I can be creative and kind of think
Right. And
outside of my,
open.
yeah, that
Yeah.
automatic thinking.
Yeah.
You have spent years mentoring other coaches and watching people grow and develop. Where do you see coaches getting stuck in their development, and what are some of the key things they need to pay attention to become more transformational in the
Yeah.
work they do?
Well, it's really a paradox that when we first learn coaching, we really do stick to the skills, because it's important, because we usually come from a profession of telling, whether leading or teaching or healing. Um, And so, in order to shift into not doing that, the competencies are great. Here's the skills that I can use. And so they become what I hold on to in order to shift my own mindset, to give up being the teller, the fixer, the healer, to be the coach. But then to become transformational, you have to forget about him. So to trust that I know my skills well enough, even if I'm fairly new at this, I know well enough that in the moment I'm with you, I'm not thinking about my checklist and what skills I'm doing. I'm just creating a safe space. And all I need to know is we need to figure out what it is you want, instead of what you have. And it's not a decision. What will the decision give you? It's not a plan. What are you hoping the plan will give you? That I just need to know what you want, really, not what other people want you to have, but what you want. And then what's getting in the way of you creating that smart person? And then at the end, what are you going to do about it? That's all you have to remember. And you
Right.
get better and better and better at your skills with practice.
Yeah.
So it's learn the competencies and then forget about them. And that's the hard thing, to let go,
Yeah.
to think I can still be of value, in that moment. But then it becomes this wonderful conversation that I'm having. I'm not doing coaching. I'm really just being with you in a conversation that I know kind of what it is I'm looking for, but I'm mostly being with you, but we're going to go on a journey of what is it you want and what's getting in the way.
I
So,
think that's key too. I mean, it really does boil down to the simplicity of where are you at, or what do you want,
mhm,
what's getting in the way, how would you like to explore it, and then
mhm,
exploring it, and then that kind of capturing of your learning and what you're going to do. Because
yeah,
it always is so funny to me too about coming up with actions at the end of a conversation. That is usually much harder to do, that below the surface. Like, yeah, we can come up with a list, but it
mhm,
doesn't necessarily connect to their insights or awarenesses. So
mhm.
if we haven't developed any insights or awarenesses,
Yeah.
what are these actions for? Like, journal, like, great, but what if I don't like to journal? It's not a great
Yeah.
technique for me, right?
Well, right, right. Well, the best time to ask is, when they have that big learning toward
Yeah.
the end. If you've really like parsed it out and they get, oh God, yeah, this is it. But first, okay, so tell me exactly what is it? They must articulate the
Yeah.
insight. You can't just like, wow, okay, now I know. What
Right.
is it? Because the brain has to hear the insight.
Yes.
Okay, once they articulate it, then to say, okay, so what are you going to do with that?
Yeah.
And generally once they have it, okay, I kind of know. Or they could even say, wow, that was so big, I need to think about it. That's still an action.
It
But I'm
is.
still going to ask them, okay, so when are you going to do that? What does thinking about it look like? When are you going to do that? To get that commitment,
I
because there
really,
still must be a commitment to doing something. Yeah.
yeah. And I
Hmm.
really want people to hear what you just said a minute ago too, which is they need the thinker needs to articulate the insight. They can't just
Yes.
have it. it's the tree
Hmm.
falling in the forest sort of analogy. If nobody hears
Hmm.
it, did it make a sound? And
Yeah.
I think to what you just shared is really, really important. We don't ask, what just happened there,
Hmm.
because we want to know what just happened there. We
Hmm.
ask it because it's so important for them to
Yes.
articulate it.
To hear it, because usually it's not fully formed. They have an insight, but until they have to put it into words, it's not a complete idea. Because oftentimes they may be able to say it in a sentence or two, but sometimes when they start to say it, it is a bit convoluted, and you may have to coach them to even clearly articulate it. Like, okay, well, so now can you say that in one sentence? And I will ask that, and they can, once they've put it out there. It's like, okay, which makes them get to the essence. But see, the brain has to hear it to embed, so they
Mhm.
will remember it. Otherwise, they're going to forget it. We have to speak it out loud in order for the brain to really catch it and put it into memory.
And I wonder also the act of speaking it out loud to another person
Hmm.
and what that does for my own personal accountability to having
Hmm.
heard it because I've
Yes,
now said it to you.
absolutely.
That's
Absolutely. I've said it out loud, and now it's real.
real.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I have to accept it. So, right, that's the critical moment.
Yeah.
So it's not just having a new awareness, it's speaking the new awareness. And usually the actions are easily come after that.
You have said multiple times today, that's why you need a coach. And you have an article that you wrote a few years ago, Why You Can't Coach Yourself. And I'm curious, like,
Mhm.
because I think some of these same elements are emerging that then the reason we can kind of coach ourselves, but not the same way that somebody else might
Mm,
coach us. We don't get the same leverage of
mm,
experience. I don't know. Maybe I'm not saying it right. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this idea
mhm.
of how.
And can we or can't we? It depends on the level of emotion you have attached to it. If I have an issue and it's not, and there's not a whole emotional attachment to it, then certainly I can sit down and figure out what it is. Why am I making this a problem? But the more attachment I have to not wanting to know why I'm making this a problem, the less likely that I'm going to look at it. But the studies of looking at the brain waves when we try to figure out a problem that's a real challenge for us on our own compared to a coach is it's not a lot of brain activity that we kind of sort things through and can come up with some ideas. But when we're coached, the brain activity is off the charts, the middle brain. I do this because we're talking about the creative center that we're dealing with and trying to reconnect to understand. When I ask you, so tell me, what does overwhelm mean to you in this situation? You have to then, what is it that overwhelm means?
Mhm.
I have to like go into here into my memory banks, and maybe even I'm not sure, like, is it really like you have way too much to do, or you have too much to do that you don't like? What's
Right.
creating that sense of overwhelm? And I like to use distinctions, if they're like, oh, I don't know, to give them some things to consider, but more than one, so that it makes them start thinking about what that is. That there's far more that goes on that can lead to seeing possibilities than when I try to do it on my own. But again, it's the level of emotion that I have attached to the situation of why might I not want to look at it? What is it that I am protecting?
Yeah.
Or I'm just so I don't know what to do. And I'm so
Yeah.
stuck. I can't figure it out. Well, then you definitely need a coach.
Yeah. That mirror back. Um, you have written many books, and I really am. I'm always fascinated by people who find the capacity to write a bunch of books. I first came across your work with Wonder Woman, and it's been a minute since I read it, so I don't remember it completely. But you have been quite prolific, even though you say you don't want to write another book, and here you are writing another book. What do you think was, because I talked to a lot of people who are like, how do I actually write the book? And I'm curious what you've discovered that has allowed you to access that ability to share your experience and voice and curiosities.
Well, first, I want to say I like writing, right? I mean, people come to me, how can I write a bestseller? And I'll always say, do you like to write now? Then
Any
forget it.
harder.
Do a podcast. I mean, ever since the second grade, I won a poetry contest that I always wanted to be a writer. So the thing, my first book was really Outsmart Your Brain, and I had self-published that, but that was because I was also in the speaker world, and they said you have to have a book. So I just recorded a workshop that I did on emotional intelligence, had it transcribed, and then worked with the transcription to create a book. And I've since then done some editions of that. So that was like, okay, got to have a book if you're going to be speaking so people can get a piece of you when they leave. If they liked you, they want a book. Wonder Woman was actually my doctoral dissertation. So I had a lot of original research. And that's when I met my publisher at an ICF conference. I happened to sit next to her. And when I was complaining that I had to sit in the back of the room, I'm a former president, wham, wham, wham. And I turned to the person next to me, what do you do? Oh, I'm an editor for Barrett Kohler. But even that, the process of writing a dissertation is you have to find something, that a question that hasn't been answered. So you have to do all this review of the literature. And that's why a lot of people don't finish. They go through the schooling, but then they don't finish their dissertation because it's hard to find that. But for me, I heard somebody speaking about women at a conference and saying, oh, men don't think about relationships till later in life, and women always put relationships first and their career later. See, you're laughing.
I
And I'm
just like
like,
the all or nothing
yeah,
thinking.
yeah.
This is
I mean,
like,
this was like 2005. I mean, it was, we were in this century. And I said, but I went
so
out
you
and
say.
I reviewed the literature and the books, and it was like everybody was saying the same thing. Women, jump off the ladder for family. I'm like, a lot of them don't. That their career is important. So it led me to researching. But that's the whole thing. When you find something that the questions that haven't been answered, or for our coaching books, the things that people are not understanding or they're not doing. So after Wonder Woman, I wrote Discomfort Zone, and it was for my publisher. Before he knew there was a big coaching market, he said, please write it for leaders. The coaches will buy it. But who bought it? The coaches. But the whole process of what is the importance of discomfort to learning. This is also why I am not going to make myself uncomfortable. So I can only learn so much, but when you say something to me that goes, oh, then actually it opens my brain. I just realized something, like when my boss said to me, wow, everybody seems to disappoint you. Will anyone ever be good enough for you? That made me go, oh. That was not comfortable. It wasn't for a long time because, what it made me realize. But boy, it opened up my brain, So I saw coaches take their clients or thinkers to the edge, and then they didn't push them off the edge. They held back like AI. It's like, oh, you're doing such a good job. You can do that later. No, we push them over the edge, because that's important. That I always say, I said in the book, the best leaders make us uncomfortable. And what does that mean? It's not that, again, if my intention is for you and I care about you and I respect you, I can make you a little uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
what that does to open up my brain in a way I cannot do for myself. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's reminding me of a boss I had, and I wrote about it in Story Jacking. Best boss probably I ever had in my life. And I was new to doing the job, and I thought I was doing great. And
Mhm.
I had some learning to do.
Mhm.
I was about, 19 or 20, so I thought I knew everything.
Mhm.
She said, she came, it wasn't so much what she said, but she came with compassion, and
Mhm.
that meeting me at my level, and like, we would love to have you stay here and continue working with us, and you're at a choice point, and the choice is you learn how to do this job, and we will help you and support you in doing that, or you have a choice that this isn't a good fit for you, and that's totally fine also.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you choose,
Mhm.
it's your choice. And I
Mhm.
just always remembered that moment is like, I ended up going, I want to stay and I want to learn. And it, like, I learned so much. And then I went away. And when I came
Mhm.
back at one point later, I was like, hey, I needed a job like now. And she's like, I'll
Mhm.
create you one. And it's those kinds of things. But she
Yeah.
did that
The
by,
willingness to, yeah. But she had to love you in the moment of challenging you. Yeah,
yes.
it's critical. So coming back to your question, it's when we find something that's difficult or missing, you know, that's when I say, okay, got to write about this. And coach the person was the same thing. It's like, they're not really coaching the person. They're very focused on the external problem, which can now be replicated by AI.
Yeah.
So it's that you find something that's important and it's not been fully addressed, or you think it hasn't in what you've read, that maybe you can add even to the body of knowledge. So I always tell people, when they say, I want to write a self-help book, blah, 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 I said, has that been written already?
Yeah.
What hasn't been written that you can't find that would be useful? That's the question.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
So I started a tradition since the last time you were on this
Mm-hmm.
show, where I ask a previous guest to ask a question to an unknown future guest.
Oh.
And I have a
Mm-hmm.
question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Where, if anywhere, are you not using all of yourself when when you're engaging with other people in the world?
Mm. Um, I would say it's outside of coaching. I think that um, I've so loved being there in coaching. But then I get outside in the world, and I'm actually working on this app with the NHN pub, the neuroscience. Uh,
NPN?
yeah, yeah. I'm on their board, and it's like those people, you know. Um, but the app measures not just focus, but safety, and it's amazing to me how many times I'm fully immersed. I'm in 90 out of 100, but it says, but there were some things that you weren't willing to take a risk, and my brain goes, oh, not me, but to look at, so what is it, what might be occurring psychologically for me in the gym class, that I want to make sure that I can do everything, that because if I can't, then, something's wrong with me. I mean, just those silly little things, that take us in a different place. That I may
Mhm.
be focused on this, but my brain is still going, what are they doing? What are they doing? And uh, and I think even that now that I've been living alone for a number of years, walking into a social, that I even have joined things just to get me out of the house and be with people socially, you know, because I don't want to lose that ability uh, to
Yeah.
connect beyond going to conferences, but with people who aren't coaches, and not to worry so much about, if I show up fully me, will it be okay? So I think it's taking it out beyond into the world. And again, coming back to that story, so can I model big light? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a challenge that I'm working on.
Oh, I love that. And on that note, your big light is still shining. And I love the appreciation of the fact that it's still that work in progress, that each of us are on a journey of our own self. And so thank
Yeah.
you so much, Marcia, for being here today.
Oh, well, thank you for asking. Just being with you is such a joy.
Thank you.